Family, can I just tell you something? Sometimes the loudest thing you will ever say is your silence. See, there are people who thrive off of your reaction. They poke, they prod, they push because they think your clap back is the proof of their power. But what they didn't know is that you've graduated from needing to explain yourself. You've leveled up to a place where your silence is a weapon, your peace is a strategy, and your restraint is a declaration that their ego will no longer live off your energy. Somebody in this room needs to know. You don't have to fight every battle with words. Sometimes the best way to win is to stop feeding what was excellence is not weakness, it's strategy. Too many times in life we've been conditioned to think that if we don't respond, if we don't clap back, if we don't defend ourselves, then we are somehow less powerful, less intelligent, or even less strong. We live in a world that equates volume with authority and reaction with strength. But the truth is, silence is not the absence of power. It is often the most potent display of it. Silence is the art of knowing that not every battle deserves your voice, not every insult deserves your response, and not every provocation deserves the energy it takes to explain yourself. When someone pushes you, they expect you to push back. They expect noise, chaos, a storm. They want evidence that they still control the atmosphere of your life. But when you choose silence, when you choose to take a step back and let their words echo in emptiness instead of bouncing off your rebuttal, you are using strategy. Because strategy is about winning the war, not wasting yourself on every skirmish. Silence says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove myself to you. Silence says, your approval does not validate me, and your disapproval does not diminish me. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest, most controlled form. Think about it. Silence requires discipline. Anyone can yell. Anyone can retaliate. Anyone can shoot back a text in anger, drag someone publicly, or air out dirty laundry when they feel attacked. That doesn't take strength. It takes impulse. But silence, that takes intentionality. Silence takes emotional maturity to resist the bait. It takes wisdom to understand that just because they called you out doesn't mean you have to step into the ring. Silence is not passive. It is active restraint. It is not giving up. It is holding back because you recognize that not everything deserves access to your energy. Silence in its strategic form shifts the narrative. When you remain quiet in the face of provocation, you force the other person to sit with themselves. They can't feed their ego on your reaction. They can't twist your words if you never spoke them. They can't inflate their sense of control if you refuse to play their game. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifts. The one who thought they had the upper hand starts questioning themselves. They start wondering why you didn't respond, why you didn't break down, why you didn't come undone like they expected. Your silence becomes the mirror they're forced to look into, and in that mirror they see their own insecurity, their own ego, their own noise. In silence, there is a preservation of dignity. Sometimes people think silence means you didn't have an answer, that you were incapable of defending yourself. But the truth is, you don't owe everyone access to your explanations. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial every time someone misunderstands you. Silence allows you to protect your peace and maintain your dignity in a world that thrives on constant noise. And that preservation of self is strategy, because when you guard your peace, you preserve your focus. When you guard your focus, you preserve your vision. And when you preserve your vision, you stay aligned with purpose instead of getting distracted by petty provocations. Silence also gives space for clarity. In the heat of the moment, when emotions are high, words spoken can't be taken back. How many relationships have been damaged not because of what someone did, but because of what was said in retaliation? Silence gives you the pause to breathe, to think, to process, and to choose your words wisely if words are needed at all. Sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps you from burning bridges that you may need to cross later. And if the bridge really does need to burn, silence ensures that it burns on your terms and not from your lack of control. Silence is also a strategy of trust. It is trusting that truth defends itself. It is trusting that your character will speak louder over time than your words in a heated moment. It is trusting that what is whispered in shadows will be brought to light without you needing to drag it out into the open yourself. Silence says, I trust the process. I trust the outcome. I trust that what is for me cannot be stolen by lies, manipulation, or ego-driven schemes. That is not weakness. Weakness is panicking and scrambling for control. Strategy is knowing you don't have to chase down every rumor or fight every critic to walk in victory. There is a spiritual dimension to silence as well. Silence is sacred. It is in silence that God often does his greatest work in us. It is in silence that prayers rise louder than words ever could. It is in silence that battles are won behind the scenes. While the enemy is confused because they thought you would fall apart when you didn't answer, silence becomes a posture of surrender, not to the situation, but to something greater than the situation. It's saying, I don't need to fight this my way because I believe it's already being handled in a higher way. That's not weakness, that's wisdom wrapped in strength. When people misunderstand silence, they often call it avoidance or cowardice. But avoidance is running away out of fear. Silence is standing still out of confidence. It's the difference between fleeing a fight and refusing to engage because you know your worth. One is fear-driven, the other is power-driven. Weakness runs because it doesn't believe it can win. Strategy stands because it knows the win is already secured, even without a word being spoken. Silence also protects your energy. Every word you speak is an expenditure of energy. Every explanation drains you a little more. Every argument taxes your spirit. And the truth is, energy is not limitless. You need your energy for building, for healing, for growing, for dreaming. If you spend all of it defending yourself against people who were never meant to understand you, you'll have nothing left for the work you were created to do. Silence is conserving your strength for the things that matter. Silence is refusing to give your pearls to swine, your wisdom to those who only want to trample it, and your heart to those who only want to break it. Silence is not weakness. It's the highest level of discipline, the deepest form of wisdom, and the strongest expression of self-control. It's knowing that real power is not proven in how loud you can be, but in how still you can remain when everything around you tries to pull you into chaos. It's knowing that silence does not mean nothing is happening. Silence often means everything is happening, but it's happening in a way that cannot be seen, cannot be manipulated, and cannot be interrupted. Silence is strategy. It is power under control. It is victory unfolding in stillness, meant to drain you. Your peace is louder than their provocation. There will always be people who thrive on disruption, who look for cracks in your composure, who poke at your vulnerabilities because they want to see if you will break. They stir the waters because they need your reaction to validate their power. But what they fail to understand is that peace carries a frequency that can't be drowned out by noise. When you walk into a room anchored in peace, you don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to argue. And you don't have to prove yourself. Your peace speaks for you in a language louder than any insult, louder than any rumor, louder than any attempt to provoke you into chaos. Peace is not passive. Peace is not about ignoring problems or pretending you are unaffected. Peace is a conscious decision to remain grounded when everything around you demands you be shaken. Peace is not silence without substance. It is silence backed by confidence, rooted in identity and anchored in trust. It is an internal declaration that no matter what storms are swirling around you, the storm will not have you. That steadiness becomes a testimony all on its own. Because when people see you provoked and expect you to lash out, but instead they see you standing tall, calm and unbothered, that calmness becomes the loudest statement in the room. Provocation is a strategy of the insecure. People provoke when they want control. They provoke when they feel small and want to make you small with them. They provoke when their ego is starving and they need your outrage to feed it. But peace denies them the satisfaction. Peace is starvation for their ego. Peace is you saying, I refuse to let your brokenness dictate my wholeness. Peace is louder because it disrupts the pattern. It breaks the cycle. It forces the provocator to deal with themselves instead of feeding off of you. There is a power in unshaken composure. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you, whether with gossip, disrespect, or outright lies. The natural instinct is to respond, to set the record straight, to let them know they crossed the line. But when you resisted, when you stayed calm, when you refused to step into the arena they built for you, notice what happened. They didn't get what they came for. They came for a show, but you gave them silence. They came for chaos, but you gave them peace. And in that moment, your peace became louder than any words you could have spoken. Peace doesn't just protect you, it also exposes them. When you refuse to be provoked, the focus shifts. People can clearly see who is stirring the drama and who is maintaining composure. Your peace shines a light on their pettiness. Your calmness reveals their chaos. And while they thought they would make you look weak or foolish, instead your peace makes them look small. Peace flips the script without you ever having to write a word. Peace is a practice of perspective. It is remembering that everything does not deserve your attention. Not every battle is assigned to you. Not every comment requires your explanation. Not every provocation is worthy of your energy. Peace is the ability to zoom out, to see the bigger picture, to understand that responding to every jab pulls you away from your purpose. Peace whispers to you, stay focused, stay grounded, stay aligned. And when you listen, your peace becomes louder than the provocation because it echoes through your actions, through your presence, through your refusal to be moved. Peace is also a form of resistance. It resists the pull to step into the same cycle of brokenness that others are trapped in. It resists the urge to match low energy with low energy. It resists the temptation to abandon your character just to prove a point. When you hold on to peace, you resist the agenda of those who seek to control you through chaos. And that resistance is powerful because it robs them of the one thing they wanted most, your reaction. There's also a spiritual dimension to peace that makes it even louder. True peace does not come from circumstances being perfect. It comes from an inner assurance that you are sustained, protected, and grounded by something greater than yourself. It is the peace that passes understanding, the kind of peace that doesn't make sense to outsiders. People will look at you and wonder how you're not falling apart, how you're not lashing out, how you're not bitter or angry after everything that's been done to provoke you. But what they don't understand is that your peace is not tied to them. It is tied to a source they cannot touch. And because they cannot touch the source, they cannot steal the peace. When peace shows up in the face of provocation, it becomes contagious. Others watching you are strengthened. They realize that they, too, can choose not to react, not to give in, not to be dragged into unnecessary wars. Your peace gives permission to others to protect their own. It teaches by example. It shows them that peace is not weakness. That peace is not surrender, but peace is strength in its purest form. In this way, your peace speaks louder than any sermon, louder than any lecture, because it is lived out in real time where provocation expected to dominate. Peace is louder because it outlasts noise. Noise is temporary, noise dies down. Arguments fade, rumors dissolve, insults are forgotten, but peace remains. When the dust settles, when the voices go quiet, when the noise loses its momentum, peace still stands. And the one who held on to peace is remembered not as the one who lost control, but as the one who had control all along. Peace is louder because it produces fruit. Out of peace comes clarity. Out of peace comes creativity. Out of peace comes strength. Out of peace comes longevity. Provocation drains, it robs, it destroys. But peace builds, it restores, it empowers. That's why it's louder. Because while provocation makes noise, peace makes impact. Provocation is about the moment. Peace is about the legacy. Your peace is not just about protecting yourself in the present. It is about positioning yourself for the future. Because the provocations you resist today will free you to pursue the opportunities waiting for you tomorrow. The energy you refuse to waste on petty conflicts is the energy you will use to build your dreams, nurture your relationships, and walk fully in your purpose. Peace is strategy for longevity. Peace is vision and action. Peace is the currency of progress, while provocation is the bankruptcy of ego. Your peace is louder because it is the one thing that cannot be faked. People can fake confidence. They can fake kindness. They can fake power, but peace cannot be imitated. Real peace is evident, undeniable, and unshackable. When you have it, it resonates. It is seen in your walk, felt in your presence, and heard even in your silence. And when provocation comes knocking, peace becomes the loudest, clearest answer you could ever give. Every reaction is free fuel for their ego. There are people who do not come into your life to build you, to love you, or to support you. They come into your life to feed off of you. Their survival depends on your energy. Their validation depends on your attention. And their sense of importance depends on your response. The moment you react, whether in anger, frustration, or even explanation, you are giving them exactly what they were craving. Reaction is their food, their water, their oxygen. They thrive on it because your response confirms their control. It tells them, I have the power to shift your mood, to disturb your peace, to control your focus. And every time you react, you hand them free fuel to keep that ego inflated. The ego is fragile, and fragile things require constant reinforcement. The person who needs to provoke you is often the one who feels the weakest within themselves. They need your anger to feel strong, your tears to feel victorious, your frustration to feel significant. Without your reaction, they are left with themselves, and for many, that is too empty to bear. This is why they push buttons. They know if they can get you to break character, they win. If they can pull you into an argument, they win. If they can distract you from your purpose to focus on them, they win. And your reaction becomes their trophy. But here's the truth. Not every provocation is worth the cost. Every time you react, you are spending energy you cannot get back. Every time you respond to foolishness, you are giving away time that could have been invested in your growth, your healing, your calling. When you react, you put yourself on the same level as the one provoking you. And in doing so, you confirm their relevance in your story. They become the center, and you unknowingly give them the stage they've been craving. Ego thrives in performance. People who provoke you often want an audience. They want the world to see you lose control so they can point and say, see, I was right about them. They want a stage manage your downfall, but they can only succeed if you step onto their stage. And the ticket price to that performance is your reaction. The moment you respond, the curtains open, the spotlight turns, and you become part of their production. But when you withhold your reaction, you shut down the show before it even begins. The psychology of ego is rooted in dependence. It cannot survive on its own. Ego must be fed by outside validation, by external attention, by the reactions of others. That is why your reaction is free fuel. It costs you more than it costs them, but it gives them more than it gives you. You walk away drained, but they walk away empowered. You feel regret, but they feel satisfied. You lose peace, but they gain confidence. And slowly, without realizing it, your energy becomes the resource that sustains their brokenness. To deny them your reaction is to deny them fuel. It is to say, I will not be the power source for your ego anymore. When you refuse to react, they begin to deflate. Their tactics lose effect, their confidence wavers, their sense of control diminishes. They may push harder for a while, trying every trick to provoke you, but once you decide that your reactions are too valuable to be wasted, you break the cycle. Their ego starves, not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them. Reaction is not always loud. Sometimes reaction comes in the form of over-explaining yourself. Sometimes reaction comes in the form of posting on social media to prove a point. Sometimes reaction comes in the form of replaying conversations in your head and letting them live rent-free in your mind. All of that is fuel. All of that is energy being transferred from you to them. And every ounce of it builds their ego a little higher while draining you a little lower. That is why boundaries are essential. Boundaries say, I will not keep pouring into an ego that wants to consume me. Holding back your reaction does not mean you don't feel. It means you are wise enough to choose where you place your energy. It means you are strategic enough to recognize that not every poke requires a push back. It means you are disciplined enough to know that your peace is more valuable than their validation. And it means you love yourself enough to refuse to be someone else's fuel source. Because when you react, you are giving pieces of yourself away freely to people who will never give anything back. Think about the times you reacted in the past. Did it ever truly change the person? Did it ever truly end the conflict? Or did it simply give them a reason to provoke you again? Reaction is like oxygen to fire. It doesn't put it out, it makes it burn brighter. The more you react, the more they realize how much control they have. But when you starve the fire, when you deprive it of oxygen, eventually it burns out. Your lack of reaction is the extinguisher. It is the quiet refusal that eventually ends what no amount of arguing ever could. Reaction also distracts you from your purpose. Every time you get pulled into defending yourself, you're stepping away from building yourself. Every time you spend hours thinking about what they said, you're losing hours you could have invested into your dreams. Every time you let someone hijack your emotions, they hijack your productivity. And little by little, your life becomes centered on proving them wrong instead of proving yourself right. That is the cost of reaction. It robs you of focus, and focus is the foundation of destiny. Your reaction is free fuel, but it's also free advertising. When you respond to gossip, you give it visibility. When you address lies, you spread them further. When you fight back publicly, you validate the narrative. Silence, on the other hand, denies them attention. It denies them reach. It denies them the audience they were hoping for. Without your reaction, their words remain small. Without your response, their influence dies in the shadows where it began. The temptation to react is always strongest when ego meets ego. They poke and your pride wants to rise. They push and your flesh wants to push back. But wisdom whispers, let them burn themselves out. Because while they may have the energy for drama, you need your energy for destiny. You cannot afford to keep giving away your fuel for free. Every reaction is a withdrawal from your emotional bank account. Every time you spend on foolishness, you deplete what could have been invested in your growth, your healing, your purpose. Reaction is free fuel for their ego, but restraint is fuel for your soul. The more you choose not to react, the more you strengthen your discipline, the more you protect your energy, The more you amplify your focus, the more you deny them your attention, the more you reclaim your power. And power that is reclaimed is power that can be redirected toward building the life you were meant to live. Restraint is the proof of maturity. Anyone can react in the heat of the moment, but it takes a different level of strength to pause, to breathe, and to choose not to let impulses dictate your actions. Maturity is not proven in how much you know or how eloquently you can argue your case, but in how well you can control yourself when everything in you is screaming to respond. Restraint is the evidence that you have grown past the stage where you need to prove a point every time someone tries to provoke you. It is the quiet strength of choosing peace over pettiness, dignity over drama, wisdom over warfare. Restraint is not weakness. It is the highest form of self-control. Children react immediately when they don't get their way, when they are misunderstood, when they feel threatened. They throw tantrums, they lash out, they demand attention. That is immaturity in action. But maturity is measured in your ability to say, I could respond, I could defend myself, I could lash out, but I choose not to. It is measured in the discipline to recognize that not every response deserves to leave your lips. Not every offense deserves access to your energy. Not every insult deserves validation with your time. Restraint is the silent testimony that you are no longer controlled by outside forces. It means you have shifted from living reactively to living intentionally. You are not swayed by every opinion, not disturbed by every provocation, not distracted by every attempt to pull you into chaos. Restraint shows that you have anchored yourself deeply enough that the winds may blow, but you will not move. It shows that you have reached a place where your identity is secure, where your value is established, where your worth is not up for debate. When you practice restraint, you protect your future from your present impulses. Many people destroy opportunities not because they lacked skill or talent, but because they lacked restraint. A single outburst, a single clapback, a single moment of losing control can cost years of progress. Doors can close because of reactions that felt justified in the moment but proved destructive in hindsight. Maturity teaches you to think not just about how it feels right now, but how it will look tomorrow. Restraint reminds you that what you protect today will sustain you tomorrow. Restraint is also proof of wisdom. Wisdom knows that some battles win themselves if you don't interfere. Wisdom knows that silence can be a louder response than any words you could craft. Wisdom knows that not everyone deserves the privilege of your reaction. Restraint is maturity saying, I understand the difference between battles that grow me and battles that drain me. It is the discernment to recognize when responding would serve no purpose other than to feed someone else's ego. There is a power in being underestimated because of your restraint. People may think your silence means you don't have an answer. They may interpret your composure as weakness. But what they don't realize is that it takes more strength to remain silent than to shout. It takes more maturity to walk away than to escalate. It takes more discipline to let peace have the final word than to fight endlessly for validation. And while they misread your restraint, you quietly preserve your power. You quietly protect your peace. You quietly strengthen your spirit. Restraint is emotional intelligence in action. It's recognizing your triggers, knowing what buttons people can press, and choosing not to give them access to the switchboard. It's understanding that provocation says more about them than it does about you. It's learning to pause and ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this aligned with my purpose? Will this matter in a week, in a month, in a year? And often the answer is no. Restraint is the maturity to act according to that answer. In relationships, restraint preserves connection. Arguments escalate when both parties react without thinking, when both people prioritize being right over being wise. But maturity teaches restraint, the ability to listen without interrupting, to process before speaking, to step back before exploding. Restraint can mean the difference between a relationship healed and a relationship destroyed. It is maturity that says, I value peace more than proving my point. It is the recognition that sometimes silence saves what words would have ruined. Restraint is not avoidance. Avoidance is running from conflict out of fear. Restraint is standing firm in conflict, but refusing to be pulled into its chaos. It's the difference between hiding and choosing. Avoidance says, I can't handle this. Restraint says, I could handle this, but it's not worth my power. One is weakness, the other is strength. One is fear-driven, the other is maturity-driven. Maturity is not proven in how loudly you can argue, but in how calmly you can stand. Restraint proves that you have graduated from needing to explain yourself to everyone that you have reached the level where validation from others is not required for you to feel secure. When you no longer feel the need to clap back at every critic, it shows that you are rooted. When you no longer allow yourself to be baited by pettiness, it shows that you are grounded. Restraint is not about what you suppress. It is about what you have mastered. Restraint preserves dignity. There is dignity in knowing that you did not allow yourself to be reduced to the level of those who tried to provoke you. There is dignity in protecting your reputation by choosing silence instead of scandal. There is dignity in guarding your character by letting peace have the final word. Maturity understands that your character will always speak louder over time than any temporary response could. Restraint ensures that your character remains intact even when everything around you tries to tear it down. Restraint is also a spiritual discipline. It is choosing to trust that some battles are not yours to fight. It is believing that vengeance does not belong to you, that vindication does not need your hand, that truth will reveal itself without your defense. Restraint is the maturity to trust that timing, not impulse, will vindicate you. It is knowing that the best answers are sometimes given by silence, the best defense is often patience, and the best weapon is peace. Restraint is preparation. Every time you practice holding back, you are training yourself for bigger battles. If you cannot restrain yourself in small arguments, how will you handle larger ones? If you cannot control your words when one person disrespects you, how will you manage when the stakes are higher? Restraint is maturity preparing you for greater levels, greater responsibility, greater influence. Because the higher you go, the more provocation you will face, and the more restraint will be required to protect what you've built. Restraint is the measure of growth. Look back at the moments when you would have once reacted immediately. Look at how you now pause, reflect, choose differently. That's growth. Growth is not measured only in achievements, but in discipline. Growth is not about how much louder you can be, but about how much stronger you can be in silence. Restraint shows that you are not who you used to be, that you have learned, that you have matured, that you have risen above the need to engage in every battle that calls your name. Restraint is the proof of maturity because it is the visible evidence of an invisible strength. It is the outward sign that inwardly you have gained control over your emotions, your impulses, your need for validation. It shows that you are no longer living for the approval of others, but for the peace within yourself. It shows that you are no longer pulled by ego, but guided by wisdom. It shows that you have shifted from surviving battles to strategically choosing which ones are worth your fight. Ego cannot survive without attention. The very foundation of ego is the need to be seen, acknowledged, and validated by others. It is a fragile construct, constantly seeking affirmation from the outside because it has no stability within. Ego thrives when eyes are watching, when ears are listening, when mouths are speaking its name. The moment attention is denied, ego begins to shrink because it cannot sustain itself on silence. It must be fed by reactions, fueled by recognition, and strengthened by visibility. Take away attention and ego is left gasping for air, unable to survive without the validation it demands. Ego feeds on drama because drama guarantees an audience. The person driven by ego will stir up conflict, spread rumors, or create chaos just to ensure they are not forgotten. It is not about truth or resolution. It is about being seen. Ego does not care whether the attention is positive or negative because either way, it affirms its existence. Every time you acknowledge it, you breathe life into it. Every time you defend yourself against it, you nourish it. Every time you argue with it, you make it stronger. The ego does not care if you hate it or admire it as long as you are focused on it. That focus is its food. That energy is its survival. When you understand that ego cannot survive without attention, you begin to see the power in withholding it. Ignoring ego is not weakness, it is strategy. When you refuse to engage, when you deny it the spotlight, when you keep your peace instead of feeding the provocation, you starve it. You cut off its oxygen. Ego thrives on reaction, but silence is its suffocation. It withers not because you fought it, but because you refuse to notice it. And that refusal is often more powerful than any confrontation ever could be. Ego is addicted to recognition, like an addict craving a fix. It constantly looks for signs that it still matters, that it still holds control, that it still commands influence. That is why some people cannot stand to be ignored. They will escalate their behavior, do outrageous things, push harder for a reaction because attention is their lifeline. They cannot bear the thought of being unseen. They cannot handle the weight of irrelevance. But the moment you decide not to play into their cycle, the moment you choose not to notice, you begin to free yourself from their grip. Ego is fragile because it has no foundation within itself. True confidence does not need attention to survive. True strength does not require validation to remain steady. But ego is an empty shell that can only be filled by others. That is why it constantly seeks fuel outside of itself. And that is why the most effective way to disarm it is to deprive it of attention. When you stop clapping for it, when you stop arguing with it, when you stop centering it in your conversations and your thoughts, it loses the very ground it stands on. Attention is a form of energy, and energy is not free. Every time you give attention to ego, you are transferring your power. You are feeding what was designed to drain you. Ego cannot build itself, so it uses you to build it. It uses your reactions, your frustrations, your words. And the more you give, the more it takes until you are left depleted, and it is left inflated. That is why wisdom teaches you to be careful where you place your attention, because attention is not passive, it is an investment. And when you invest in ego, you never see a return, only loss. Ego cannot survive without attention, but it will do everything in its power to convince you that it deserves it. It will twist stories to make you defend yourself. It will lie to make you prove yourself. It will provoke to make you fight yourself. All of it is a trap designed to secure your focus. But once you recognize the game, you can choose not to play. You can choose to protect your peace instead of protecting your pride. You can choose to preserve your focus instead of proving your point. You can choose to let silence speak instead of wasting words. In relationships, ego often demands the last word. It craves being right, being justified, being seen as the winner. But maturity teaches that winning is not about being louder, but about being wiser. When you withhold attention from ego, you take away its victory. You leave it shouting into an empty room, frustrated because no one is there to witness. Ego thrives in the crowd, but it crumbles in solitude. And when you refuse to give it an audience, you dismantle its power without ever lifting a finger. Ego cannot survive without attention because attention validates its lies. It whispers, "You need me. You must defend me. You cannot survive without me." But the truth is, you are stronger without ego. You are freer without ego. You are more peaceful without ego. The only reason ego feels so strong is because of the attention it receives. Remove the attention, and suddenly it is revealed for what it really is: fragile, insecure, and powerless. There is also a spiritual truth here. Ego thrives in noise but cannot survive in the presence of peace. Peace is too still, too grounded, too rooted in truth for ego to coexist with it. Ego demands attention outward, while peace demands attention inward. Ego craves the spotlight, while peace thrives in stillness. Ego cannot live in a space where you are secure in your identity, where you no longer need the approval of others, where you are no longer swayed by provocation. That is why starving ego of attention is not just an act of discipline, it is an act of freedom. Attention is choice. You cannot always control who provokes you, but you can control where you place your focus. You can decide whether to give them what they want or to keep it for yourself. You can decide whether to inflate their ego or to strengthen your peace. Every time you withhold attention, you are reclaiming control. Every time you refuse to notice, you are protecting your energy. Every time you turn your focus back to your purpose, you are starving ego and feeding destiny. Ego cannot survive without attention. And this is the greatest leverage you hold. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to prove yourself against it. You do not need to explain yourself to it. All you need to do is deny it what it craves most. And the moment you do, the moment you protect your attention as the priceless resource it is, ego loses its strength, loses its relevance, loses its hold.